The typical American retiree passes away leaving behind more than $320,000 sitting completely untouched in their various accounts. We aren't talking about $3,200 left over. We aren't even talking about $32,000. $320,000. Unspent. Unconverted into life experience. It just sits there, accumulating basis points and interest long after the person it belonged to has ceased breathing. And here is the statistic that most people are entirely unaware of. A study conducted in 2019 by the Employee Benefit Research Institute tracked retirees who entered their golden years with balances of $550,000 or higher. Nearly 2 decades later, these individuals had spent down less than 15% of that total capital, only 15% over the course of nearly 20 years. You could theoretically retire tomorrow morning, spend money like a malfunctioning slot machine, and still die a wealthy person. The broader financial industry examines that statistic and labels it a massive success story. I look at that same number and I see an entire lifetime of deferred living that never actually got cashed in. And the aspect that genuinely bothers me is that those dollars represent something far more specific than just money. They represent experiences that had expiration dates, and those dates have already passed. There is a book that articulates this argument better than anything else I have encountered, and it is titled Die with Zero by Bill Perkins. He is a hedge fund manager and energy trader, exactly the type of person who has lived aggressively enough to possess real credibility when he tells you that you are likely living too carefully. The central argument is genuinely uncomfortable for someone with my background. I'm Pam. And I've spent over a decade running my own business, with significant 6-figure sums invested, surrounded by accountants and fiscal lawyers who drilled the idea into me that the number going up is always the ultimate good. The author's argument is that the majority of us are not actually building a life. We are building a spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet is inevitably going to outlive us. Today, I am breaking down the actual mechanics of that argument, not the feel-good version you might find on a generic lifestyle blog, and not the treat yourself influencer take, but the version that includes Federal Reserve data, behavioral economics research, and what the numbers actually indicate about how people spend, or more accurately, refuse to spend, in the final decades of their lives. This is not a book review. Think of it as an autopsy of a failed financial philosophy. I want to offer you one specific image to hold on to for the remainder of this video, because I am going to keep circling back to it. Imagine a gift card, a very generous one. Let's say it is loaded with $12,000, and you received it when you were 32 years old. You carry this card in your wallet for decades, protecting it carefully, never quite finding the exact right moment to utilize it. Every single year you add more value to it, you contribute, it compounds, and it grows larger. By the time you reach age 67, it is worth $450,000. You have been diligent, and you have been responsible. But there is something important in the fine print that you never read carefully. The card itself never expires. However, your ability to enjoy what it buys absolutely does. Every year you hold on to it, items disappear from the menu quietly without any announcement. The card still looks exactly the same. The balance is still sitting there, but the menu is not the same. That is the gift card. That is what I am talking about for the next 20 minutes. Every time I say gift card, you will know exactly what I mean. In a few minutes, I am going to show you what happens to the human brain when it finally reaches the level of wealth it thought was enough, and why that moment changes almost nothing about actual behavior. But first, here's why the savings problem is even more broken than you likely think it is. There's a man named Arthur. Arthur worked for 34 years as a civil engineer in Ohio. He was a meticulous guy, the kind of person who maintained a separate spreadsheet just to manage his main spreadsheet. He maxed out his 401k contributions every single year since 1991. He drove the exact same car for 15 years. He vacationed only once during his 40s, 5 days in Myrtle Beach, and felt a low-grade guilt about the cost the entire time he was there. Arthur retired at 68 with $1.6 million in savings. His financial planner shook his hand warmly, called him a brilliant success story, and meant it sincerely. Arthur died at age 73 from a sudden heart attack. He had been planning to visit Ireland ever since his wife mentioned it back in 2005. He had a digital folder on his desktop labeled Ireland Trip, filled with saved articles about County Clare and restaurant recommendations in Dublin. He never went. His estate passed to his adult children. Both of them were already in their late 40s, already financially stable, and already well past the years when a sudden inheritance significantly bends the trajectory of a life. The money arrived too late to matter. The experiences arrived never. Now, Arthur's story isn't primarily a tragedy about dying relatively young. It is a tragedy about living small for over 3 decades when the math never actually required it. And the data makes this a generational issue, not an exceptional one. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, the median age at which Americans receive an inheritance is roughly 52 years old. 52. The people receiving that windfall are already established adults. Their career paths are mostly set. Their homes are largely paid for. Their kids are in high school or college. The money makes an already comfortable life slightly more comfortable. And the person who built that pile of cash spent 4 decades eating lunch at their desk to accrue it. You think the problem here is that people do not save enough money. The actual problem is that saving became the ultimate goal instead of the tool it was meant to be. The gift card became the point of the exercise. Nobody spends a gift card they fall in love with holding. This is what behavioral economists refer to as the saver's identity trap. Once saving becomes who you fundamentally are, spending feels like a moral failure. David Labson at Harvard has studied this phenomenon extensively. The psychological attachment to a growing account balance is almost neurologically identical to other forms of clinical hoarding behavior. The number going up produces a very real dopamine response in the brain. The number going down triggers a genuine threat response, even when the math explicitly says there is no actual danger. Even when you are 73, fully healthy, with more money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes, watching the balance decrease by $25,000 to pay for a trip to Japan feels like a tangible loss. The brain does not distinguish between a strategic withdrawal from abundance and running out of resources. Both register as a threat, and this is where standard financial advice completely breaks down. Because standard advice treats this problem as purely mathematical. Save this specific percentage, hit this exact number, follow this safe withdrawal rate. But the problem isn't the math. The problem is that the people giving this advice have never addressed why someone who has already hit the target number keeps behaving exactly like someone who hasn't. The gift card is worth $450,000. The menu has been shrinking for over 30 years, and you still cannot bring yourself to use it. Stay with me here, because this is where the book gets genuinely interesting. And this is the part that actually changed how I think about my own capital allocation decisions. The author introduces a concept he calls memory dividends. The first time I read it, I thought it was just the kind of soft language that life coaches use to justify irresponsible spending habits. Then I sat with the concept for a few days and realized it is actually a returns calculation, a rigorous one. Here's the central idea. When you have a real experience, not just a comfortable evening, but something that actually costs you something, requires you to show up, and pulls you out of your routine, that experience continues to pay you emotional returns for the rest of your life. The story you tell at dinner parties, the feeling that surfaces randomly on a Tuesday afternoon when you are sitting at your desk, the thing your kids reference when they describe their own childhood to their children. These are not just passive memories. They are recurring income streams with a yield that starts the very day of the experience and compounds forward. Now, think about the critical timing of that yield. Take a road trip through the American Southwest. Do it at age 27 with 3 close friends. Everyone is broke, sleeping in the car, watching the sun come up over Arches National Park, and not entirely believing it is real. That experience pays you dividends for the next 50 years. You are still laughing about that story at age 76. The compounding period is half a century long. Do that same trip at age 74. You are comfortable now, nice hotel, good knees. It is a wonderful trip, but the compounding period is perhaps only 12 years. Same financial cost, a fraction of the lifetime return. This is not sentimental nonsense. This is the time value of memories. And it follows the exact same logic as the time value of money. $1 invested at age 26 is worth radically more than the same dollar invested at age 56 because of the length of the compounding runway. An experience at age 31 pays more lifetime dividends than the identical experience at age 66. Not because the experience itself is worse, but because there is simply less runway left to collect the returns. And here is where it connects directly to financial behavior. We teach people to front-load investment contributions because compound interest rewards early action. Put the money in early. Let time do the heavy lifting. The math takes over. But we completely fail to apply the mirror image of that principle to how we live our lives. Front-load your meaningful experiences for the exact same mathematical reason. The compounding runway is longer. The lifetime return is higher. The yield is significantly better. The researcher Thomas Gilovich at Cornell has spent his career studying the relationship between spending patterns and long-term well-being. His conclusion, published across decades of rigorous research, is clear. Experiential spending produces significantly more lasting satisfaction than material spending. And the effect is amplified by how early in life the experience occurs. The memories compound over time. The physical stuff depreciates. You have probably heard a version of this sentiment before, but here is the number most people have not seen attached to it. In studies tracking satisfaction over time, people who spent money on experiences reported higher well-being scores, even when asked to evaluate those experiences 18 to 22 years later. The memory stayed warm and valuable. The couch purchased during the same period did not. But here is the vital addition the book makes that nobody else is saying. The memory dividend calculation is asymmetric in a very specific way. A difficult experience at age 25 can still pay dividends. You grow from it. You laugh about it later. It becomes the story that defines a chapter of your life. Even bad memories compound into something useful. But a deferred experience, something you kept meaning to do but didn't, that pays exactly 0 dividends. You cannot compound a memory you never made. The Ireland trip in Arthur's desktop folder produced 0 memory dividends, 0 stories told at dinner, 0 moments his grandchildren inherited. The folder existed physically. The experience did not. Your gift card earns interest in the account. Your experiences only earn interest if you spend them. By the way, Hit subscribe if you are finding this useful, because YouTube's algorithm is genuinely unpredictable, and there is a real chance it never shows you one of my videos again if you don't. The financial planning industry's official position on memory dividends is essentially, "Sir, our Monte Carlo simulation does not have a data field for experiences you actually enjoyed. Please refer back to your glide path and your expense ratio. Thank you for your business." Now, I want to introduce a secondary question here, one that runs alongside the main argument and that I think is actually the hidden tension inside this entire book. It is the question I kept asking myself while reading it, and it is the one that I think most of the people watching this are actually wrestling with, even if they haven't framed it this exact way. The question is not, should I spend more? The real question is, how do you actually know when you have crossed the line from genuine security into hoarding? Because the die with zero philosophy, if you take it at face value, sounds like philosophical permission to just spend money. And most people I have talked to who have read this book, and I've had this conversation more than a few times, they finish it, feel briefly liberated, maybe make a restaurant reservation, and then return to saving at exactly the same rate within 6 weeks because the underlying anxiety didn't respond to the argument. The anxiety does not respond to math. The number in the account went up, and the anxiety went up alongside it, as it always does, running on its own completely separate track. I want to come back to this critical question at the end because I think there is an actual answer. Not a motivational one, but a structural one. Sit with that question for now. Now, here is what nobody is telling you about retirement planning. And I mean this quite literally. Your financial advisor is almost certainly not telling you this, partly because the model they use does not account for it, and partly because the incentive structure of the industry rewards keeping your money invested, not helping you spend it strategically. Your life has seasons, not metaphorically, but practically, medically, and realistically. And the purchasing power of a dollar, not in inflation terms, but in your ability to convert that dollar into genuine experience, is not equal across those seasons. The author divides life into 3 distinct buckets. First, the go-go years, roughly your 30s through your mid-50s depending on health. This is high energy, high mobility, the period when your body is still mostly on your side, and your ability to convert money into experience is near its peak capacity. Second, the slow-go years, from your mid-50s into your early 70s for most people. You are still active, still healthy, but the intensity dial is turning down. You prioritize comfort over intensity, a luxury villa over a hostel, a long river cruise over backpacking. The experiences are still rich, they are just different. And finally, the no-go years, when health becomes the primary variable in every single decision. This is when the list of things your body will cooperate with narrows considerably, and when the dominant spending category shifts away from experience and toward medical care. Here is the hard data attached to this framework. The Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey, which I spent more time analyzing than any reasonable person should, shows that household spending peaks around age 47 and then declines steadily. This does not happen because incomes drop. It happens because wants, needs, and physical access to experiences gradually contract. By the time the average American reaches age 76, they are spending roughly 35% less per year than they were at age 52. 35% less. Not because they are running out of money, but because they want and can access fewer things. The menu on the gift card is shrinking, measurably, decade by decade. But look at when the traditional retirement system tells you to start spending freely. Age 66, maybe 63 if you push for early retirement. In other words, The entire architecture of American retirement planning is designed to release your resources to you at almost exactly the moment your ability to fully use them begins its long decline. The gift card becomes fully accessible precisely as the menu starts disappearing. This is not an accident born of bad intentions. It is an accident of history. The age 65 retirement benchmark was codified in an era when life expectancy was significantly lower, when jobs were physically exhausting, and when retirement was understood to mean roughly 10 years of rest before death. The model was built for a world where retiring at 65 and dying at 74 was the plan. We have added a decade or more to average lifespan since then and barely updated the underlying architecture. We kept the inputs. We changed nothing else. There is a man called Julian, a software architect living in Austin, Texas. He was 42 years old when this story becomes relevant. He had 2 kids, ages 9 and 12. He had a specific number in his head, $2.2 million. Until he hit that exact number, he was in full accumulation mode. 4-day vacation maximum, no sabbaticals, and no coaching his kids' baseball teams because the season conflicted with his project cycles. He was 2 years away from hitting his number when his older kid, 14 by then, started spending less time at home. Not dramatically less, just the gradual, natural drift of a teenager toward his own life, his own friends, and his own developing identity. It is the way it is supposed to go. Julian did a calculation one night that had nothing to do with compound interest. He counted the summers remaining before both kids would be gone to college, to their own lives, to adulthood. He had perhaps 4 or 5 summers left where both kids would actually be home and would actually want to do things as a family unit. The window for shared experience with his children at these specific ages, not the future adult versions, but the actual current versions of his kids, was closing faster than his portfolio was growing. And unlike the portfolio, it didn't compound. It just closed. He took a 6-month sabbatical, coached 2 full baseball seasons, took the family to Japan, to Portugal, and to a remote cabin in Montana where the lack of Wi-Fi turned out to be survivable for all parties. He came back with $950,000 in savings instead of his planned $2.2 million. And he later said, this is from a real interview, he said those few years with his kids before they became adults were the best return he had ever gotten on any capital allocation. Not because he is sentimental, but because the compounding period on those specific memory stories his kids will tell their own kids, the baseline of how his children describe their childhood, runs 50 years forward. Was it the right decision for absolutely everyone? No, but Julian wasn't being irresponsible. He calculated, and he decided deliberately. The difference between Julian and Arthur isn't courage or recklessness. It is that Julian understood which items on the gift cards menu had expiration dates, and he ordered before they expired. Now, here is what nobody wants to say out loud, and this is the part of the book that makes people genuinely uncomfortable if they are actually paying attention. Let me close the loop on the question I raised earlier. How do you know when you have crossed from security into hoarding? Because I promised you a structural answer, not a motivational one. The book provides a framework. First, there is your survival threshold. This is the actual number you need to never run out of money under realistic worst-case assumptions, accounting for longevity, healthcare costs, inflation, and genuine black swan events. Calculate this number rigorously with a fee-only fiduciary who earns nothing by inflating it. This number is probably lower than the vague one you have been chasing. Then there is your comfort number. This is what you need to live well, spend freely within reason, and maintain your lifestyle without constant anxiety about market volatility. This is your actual retirement target, the number your plan should be genuinely optimizing for. And then there is a third number, the fear number. This is the one you keep pursuing past the comfort number indefinitely because the anxiety is running on its own engine now, disconnected from any specific plan, specific experience, or specific goal. The fear number corresponds to nothing real. There is no trip attached to it, no gift you are planning to give, no timeline. It is simply a larger balance that feels safer than a smaller balance, and the only way to reach it is to defer more of your life. And when you finally get there, it will feel exactly the same as it does now, and you will decide you need even more. Brad Klontz, a clinical psychologist specializing in financial behavior, not a self-help personality, he publishes in peer-reviewed journals, has documented a specific pattern he calls money vigilance, where people become so focused on building and protecting wealth that the wealth itself never serves its stated purpose. The saving becomes self-referential. You save merely to save. The gift card becomes a collectible you would never dream of spending. And collectibles do not buy experiences. They sit in climate-controlled storage and get appraised only after you die. The 3-level test I just described, survival threshold, comfort number, fear number, is how you locate yourself on the spectrum. If your current portfolio is already at or near your comfort number, and you are still in full accumulation mode, you are no longer optimizing for security. You are optimizing out of sheer habit and anxiety. That is a different problem entirely, and it requires a completely different response. The die with zero prescription for what to do about it is a 3-part calculation. First, protect the survival threshold completely. No negotiation, no optimism, no, it will probably be fine. Second, identify the experiences belonging to each season of your life and assign them real dollar amounts and real timelines, not vague someday plans. And third, give the excess away while you can still participate in the giving. To your kids when they are young enough for a financial intervention to change a trajectory, to causes you genuinely care about, to shared experiences with people who are still alive and healthy enough to enjoy them with you. On inheritance timing specifically, the Federal Reserve data I mentioned earlier bears repeating. The median age of inheritance receipt in the United States is roughly 52 years old. At age 52, most people's lives are structurally set. Their financial decisions are largely already made. The inheritance simply makes a comfortable life more comfortable. Now imagine that same amount transferred at age 31. That is the difference between a down payment that gets someone into their first home versus a deposit into an already funded retirement account. That is the difference between eliminating student debt that has been reshaping every financial decision someone makes versus adding to a balance they won't touch for another decade. It is the same dollar, but with radically different leverage and radically different life impact. Your money has a higher impact multiplier when the people you love are younger, when they are at genuine inflection points, when a financial intervention actually bends a trajectory rather than just adding cushion to one that is already established. Every year you hold it past the point of your own genuine need, you are reducing its usefulness to everyone, including yourself. Let me give you a concrete scenario because I want this to land in real numbers, not abstractions. You are 44 years old. Your household income is $175,000. You have been maxing out your 401k for 13 years. Your current portfolio value is $510,000. You have 2 kids, ages 15 and 18. Your plan is to work until age 68, reach $2.3 million in total savings, then retire and travel. This is a very common plan. This is probably someone you know. Here is what the standard projection does not show you. By the time you retire at 68, your kids will be 39 and 42. They will not be waiting around for you to take them anywhere. They will have kids of their own, jobs with vacation constraints, and lives with their own momentum. The version of family travel you have been mentally deferring and financially saving for. The one where your kids are still young enough to actually want to spend significant time with you, still at an age where a summer trip becomes part of how they define their childhood. That version expired around the time your youngest turned 21. You are not saving for a vacation. You are saving for a version of your life that will not exist by the time you access the funds allocated to it. The Die with Zero reframe proposes this. What if you reduced your 401k contributions by $22,000 per year for the next 6 years, still contributing meaningfully, still well above any reasonable minimum, and deployed that roughly $132,000 in capital into experiences during the specific window when your kids are still genuinely present in your life and still want to be there? A real international trip annually. A summer where you are present instead of working late. The shared memories that become the emotional foundation of how your children remember their adolescence and describe their family to the world for the next 50 years. The portfolio math on that decision is stark. You give up roughly $180,000 to $200,000 in future portfolio value over 2 decades, assuming 7% returns. That is a real financial cost. I am not minimizing it, but here is what you purchased with that cost. You purchased the version of your kids' memories where the parent was present during the years that formed the baseline of adult memory. The memory dividends on that specific investment pay out over 50 years, multiplied across your children's own storytelling. References in their own children's understanding of family cannot be modeled in any spreadsheet I have ever seen, but it is the only return that is genuinely non-renewable. Every other financial loss can theoretically be recovered. The years when your kids are 15 and 18 are never recoverable. This is not a pitch to stop saving. It is a pitch to be precise about what you are actually optimizing for. Because right now, most disciplined savers are optimizing for a number that they have never specifically decided to spend on experiences they have never specifically scheduled for a version of their life that the calendar is quietly making unavailable. So, here are 3 things specific to this argument. This is not generic financial advice. First, calculate your actual survival number this year. Not the number you have been vaguely chasing, but the real number modeled with actual rigor. If your current portfolio is already within striking distance of that number, you are no longer in accumulation mode for safety reasons. You are in accumulation mode because accumulation is simply what you do. That deserves to be a conscious choice, not a default setting. Second, map your experiences to your seasons and do it concretely. Write down the experiences that matter to you, the ones that have lived in the someday column for years. Assign each one a season. Look at which go-go column items you have been deferring and identify which of those have time windows attached to them. Not deadlines in the abstract, but actual expiration dates based on the ages of the people involved, the condition of your body, and the version of the experience you actually want. Those are your highest priority items on the gift card's menu. Not because you are going to die soon, but because the menu is already smaller than it was 10 years ago and will be smaller again in 10 more. Third, time your giving better. If you have adult children or causes you care about, your money has a higher utility multiplier earlier than later. Not all of it, and not recklessly. But a deliberately timed transfer when someone is 31 and at a real inflection point changes the arc of a life. A transfer at age 63 changes the comfort of a life that is already fully formed. Same dollar, completely different leverage. The financial industry is structurally incentivized to keep your money invested and growing right up until your estate is distributed by a probate attorney. And that incentive has absolutely nothing to do with your actual best interest. There is an entire industry, estate planning, probate law, wealth transfer consulting, that exists specifically to redistribute money from people who saved it diligently to people who had already figured out how to live without it. This industry generates nearly $35 billion a year in fees. The system is, in a very specific way, financially enthusiastic about you dying wealthy. Lazy investing built more fortunes than crypto memes ever did. And dying with $2.2 million you were always meaning to spend built more regret than any investment mistake I have ever seen. The gift card expired in the wallet. The menu that was once full of things worth ordering is mostly unavailable now. And the balance, the beautiful, compounded, carefully protected balance, is going to be distributed by people in suits to people who will deposit it into their own carefully protected balances. The system repeats. Nobody goes to Ireland.